Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sunday's Other Scriptures for March 29th. It is Palm Sunday, the remembrance of Jesus riding into Jerusalem and being greeted by people waving palm branches and throwing down their cloaks to keep the dust down, really giving a royal welcome to Jesus as he entered Jerusalem at the beginning of Passover week, the final Passover week, the one on which he would eventually be crucified, and the week would end with him in the tomb, and a new week would begin with him rising from the tomb. So we remember, and my sermon is going to be on the events of that Palm Sunday, specifically Jesus riding into town, why he did it the way he did it, and also what followed immediately after, which was what's called Jesus cleansing the temple. That is, he overturned the tables of the money changers and he kicked out those who were selling animals in the outer court of the temple. And I'll be talking in my sermon about why he did that and what the significance was. But let's try and tie the other scriptures for the morning together. Our first reading is taken from Isaiah chapter 50, and in it, Jesus is predicted in the words of Isaiah, who is speaking as the servant, the suffering servant of Israel. It's one of several what are called servant songs in Isaiah, in which he speaks on behalf of Israel, the servant as it should have been, which later Jesus would take that role and become the perfect suffering servant of Israel, who would suffer for our salvation. And this is a verse that Jesus himself quotes in the synagogue. The sovereign Lord has given me an instructed tongue to know the word that sustains the weary. That's certainly true of Jesus. We know that he healed people, that he sustained people, he encouraged people. He wakens me, my ear to listen, like one being taught. Well, that's an interesting phrase. You're listening, but it's like someone being taught. It kind of brings to mind the fact that Jesus, in his human form, didn't know everything. He didn't know the day of his return and so on. But at the same time, he knew the will of his Father. He was had an instructed tongue. He spoke, as the crowd said, with authority, unlike the religious leaders. And he was maybe relearning these things in his human form. That is, he knew what was in people's hearts, but he knew the nature of God, even though he was somewhat limited intentionally in his human form. So it says he has not been rebellious. He's not drawn back. He offered his back to those who beat me, which is literally going to be true by the end of this Passion Week for Jesus. To those who, his cheeks to those who pulled out his beard, which sounds painful, and it was both painful and humiliating. He did not hide his face from mocking and spitting. That was literally true of Jesus. But he will not be disgraced. The sovereign Lord will help him. Therefore, he set his face like flint. And this is literally what it says Jesus did as he was approaching Jerusalem for that last Passover, is that he set his face like flint. Think about that image for a moment. He was completely impassive. He was determined. He was going to get there. And he didn't whine. He didn't complain. He just resolved to go there and to sacrifice for us. And then it says, he who vindicates me is near. And who is it that vindicates Jesus? Well, of course, it's the Father by raising him from the dead after his crucifixion. So who's going to bring charges against him? Well, in eternity, no one can. In fact, even in this life, only the false charges of the high priest and the priests and the religious leaders. So, this is really a challenge. Let me face each other. It is the sovereign Lord who helps me. Who is it that condemns me? The idea is that if God is on his side, if he's obeying the sovereign Lord, then no one else's charges can stick. And indeed, the punishment would not stick. His death would not stick. Then we have Psalm 118, which is one of the halal psalms, really a section of it. The halal psalms, halal meaning praise, as in hallelujah, praise Yah, the God. And this is one about opening the gates for the righteous. And this, of course, is really a depiction in retrospect of Jesus entering into Jerusalem on that final beginning of Passover week. I will enter and give thanks to the Lord. It is the gate of the Lord through which the righteous may enter, and no one was as righteous as Jesus. I will give thanks, for you answered me. You've become my salvation. The Lord has done this. It's marvelous. And we have that famous passage about the stone the builders rejected has become the capstone. And what's ironic is that Jesus and his disciples likely sang this psalm on that evening in the Garden of Gethsemane when Jesus would be rejected by the builders, and yet he would become the capstone of God's new dwelling. So that's what it means. The Lord has done this. It's marvelous in our eyes. Let us rejoice and be glad. And then the Lord save us cry. This is the call of Hosanna, means save or save us. And this is what the people would cry when Jesus was entering into Jerusalem. And it says, with boughs in hand, join the festal procession up to the horns of the altar. The horns, by the way, were those little protrusions on the corners of the altar that kept wood and sacrifices from falling out. And so this really depicts what ended up happening on Passover as they were headed to the temple for the beginning of that Passover week, the sacrificing of the lambs and so on, that Jesus was walking in procession, riding on this donkey, and was praised by the crowds with palm branches, boughs in hand. And so it says, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. This is part of the Passover liturgy. And then we have this reading from Paul's letter to the Philippians, famous passage, one that is written almost to convey a song, and it may have been an early church hymn. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ. And then this is the hymn part, who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God to be grasped, which is literally true of Jesus, that he was in very nature God, so he didn't grasp at equality. Now think of how that's different from Adam and Eve. They were made in the image of God, but they grasped at equality. They wanted to become like God. And Jesus, on the other hand, made himself nothing. Being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God raised him up, exalted him to the highest place, that and gave him the name above every name, that every tongue on earth shall proclaim on the earth and under the earth that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Under the earth, suggesting that in hell even, the demons would have to reluctantly proclaim that Jesus Christ is Lord, and those who had rejected him will proclaim reluctantly that he is Lord. Every knee will bow. Some will bow gladly in joy that the Lord that they have trusted, Jesus Christ is Lord, and some in terror. Their knees will bow because they blew it and they now realize that Jesus Christ is Lord. So all of that sets us up for the reading of what happens on Palm Sunday, Jesus entering into the village. As I said, I'll be the village of Jerusalem. As I said, I will be preaching on that, leaving the village of Bethany and going through a little village called Bethphage on the Mount of Olives. And he sends his disciples to get a donkey and a colt of the donkey. He is, according to prophecy, and the other Gospels tell us, going to be riding the colt, but the mother donkey was likely brought along too. And I'll explain that in the sermon. So they went and they borrowed this animal, which apparently had been offered to Jesus, and now the time is right. The one time we know of Jesus riding an animal. And he enters and the people shout, from this psalm, save, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. It kind of reflects that epistle reading, doesn't it? Hosanna in the highest. In other words, God is glorified by the naming of Jesus as the Messiah. And then he goes into the temple and drives out the money changers and those selling sacrificial animals. I will be explaining why that is, and how do we reconcile the fact that Jesus has come as the gentle king who will sacrifice himself, and yet he goes into the temple and he's seemingly angry. He drives out these money changers, and it's like, what's wrong with having a gift shop in our church, right? Um, and and that's what I'm going to be talking about this morning. But you should have some hints in our other readings. I hope this creates a lot of discussion for you. The Lord bless your study.